Hi all, hope we're keeping safe and well. Today we're going to have a look at the first of the relationships poems that are to do with romantic relationships. And we're going to start with the first poem in the collection chronologically, which is When We Two Parted by Lord Byron. So as we're going through this, I would expect you to have your midsole grid or your notes ready and running through each of the different sections and just make your own notes. If you've got a clean copy of the poem to annotate as we go through, that would be really, really useful as well. This is one of the ones that's very, very easy to find online because it's out of copyright, so it's quite an easy one to pick up. I hope it's really, really useful. Okay, so we're just going to start with a quick reading through from the poem. So we have, When we two parted, in silence and tears, half broken-hearted to sever for years, pale grew thy cheek and colder thy kiss, truly that hour foretold sorrow to this. The dew of the morning sunk chill on my brow, it felt like a warning of what I feel now. Thy vows are all broken, and light is thy fame, I hear thy name spoken, and share in its shame. They name thee before me, a knell to mine ear, a shudder comes over me, why wert thou so dear? They knew not I knew thee, who knew thee too well, long, long shall I rue thee, too deeply to tell. In secret we met, in silence I grieve, that thy heart could forget, thy spirit deceive. If I should meet thee after long years, how should I greet thee? With silence and tears. Okay, this is one of the poems in the anthology where context is particularly important, and understanding what is going on in the poet's mind and his thought process is quite significant into understanding what the poem's all about. So the poem is by Lord Byron, who was one of the great romantics of his age. He was a scandalous and roguish man who had several affairs throughout his lifetime, and had several illegitimate children throughout his lifetime. Eventually his scandalous behaviour caught up with him, and he was almost voluntarily exiled from the country, and he went to go and live in Italy, where he died. This poem, Byron claims to have written it in 1808, but in reality we believe it was written in 1816, and we believe it was about his relationship with a lady called Lady Frances Webster. Now, Lady Webster was married, and Byron had supposedly had a fairly scandalous affair with her. However, as that affair came to a close, and later on in his life, Byron found out that she also had a relationship with the Duke of Wellington, so she was having a relationship with three men at the same time, at different times, another affair. Now, the poem itself is about Byron's feelings of rejection, Byron's feelings of sorrow and regret, about how he has to remain silent about their relationship when others are talking about this more recent scandal, because he can't reveal his role in that relationship before. It's a very sort of bitter poem, and it has no sort of concrete conclusions that Byron draws. He consistently refers to the silence and the tears and the feelings of sorrow that he has about the relationship that he had with Lady Webster. So the context of this poem is quite interesting because it is about this broken relationship and how Byron is feeling at this point, and how he feels he cannot express his emotions or his attitudes to anyone, as he has to remain silent and is not allowed to express his feelings to anybody. Okay, a lot of the imagery within the poem is to do with the imagery of sorrow, and particularly the imagery of death, to consider the relationship and how it has come to an end, it's come to its death. The first sort of image that we have is the "how do I greet thee" with silence and tears. That's a particularly powerful image. We imagine the weeping, and we imagine the sorrow that Lord Byron is feeling at this recollection of the relationship that he had with Lady Webster. We also have imagery of death. So at one point we have a knell to mine ear. Now, knell is quite a significant word because it is a funeral bell. It's the bell that will be rung to signal the funeral of someone. So therefore, we could look at this imagery and look at this as the death of the relationship, and how the sound of her name is a knell to his ear. This is sort of a funeral bell that we have there. We have lots of imagery to do with coldness as well, which could consider the death of the relationship. We have the dew of the morning sinking chill on my brow. So we've got to imagine the morning dew, which you get on grass in the morning when it's a colder morning. This sort of water is sinking chill on his brow, as if it's like coldness and sickness. We have pale grew thy cheek and cold colder thy kiss. This imagery is quite significant, looking at like almost this corpse-like relationship that they have, this sort of deathly relationship. We've obviously got pale, cold. We can infer the sickness that relationship was there as it comes to its conclusion. We have language to do with isolation, imagery to do with isolation. In secret we met, in silence I grieve. So we have the fact that he's isolated and alone and feels that he's unable to express his emotions and be able to talk to the people around him. Possibly the most important image that we have is the half broken hearted. Now this is a juxtaposed phrase. It's almost paradoxical in the way that it works. How can we possibly be half broken hearted? It's either broken or it isn't. Now we have the fact that, does Byron feel that he is more broken hearted than Lady Webster, perhaps? Is the fact that it could potentially be that there was never a deeper, meaningful connection between them in the first place, so therefore it couldn't be a fully broken heart. The fact that it has to remain secret and was never a public relationship, does that infer that it has to be half broken hearted? The severance for years, obviously indicating this deep and split, to sever something is to cut it deeply. So we have this cut deeply and to break the connection between them, sorry. So what we have here is a really, really interesting image in that first stanza that we could look at and explore to further infer about Byron's feelings, attitudes and emotions. Okay, as we've already discussed, the tone of the poem is quite significant, because what we're looking at is Byron's sorrow, his misery at the fact that this relationship was broken down, and the lingering feelings of sorrow and despair that he feels as this goes on. So if we're looking at particular inferences for this, the first one I would look at is the idea of the half broken hearted to sever for years. We have the fact that this is not a recent breakup. This is something that's happened a long time ago. This is to sever for years. It's a long time since this relationship, and Byron is still feeling that sorrow. We have all that imagery of sickness. It's a pale grew thy cheek, colder thy kiss. We have the feeling that Byron is potentially trying to cling on to this relationship, whereas Lady Webster probably less keen to do so. The fact that she was growing pale and cold of kisses, that therefore it's the warmth and the affection in that relationship is dying out. Similarly, we have the idea of the funeral bell that we spoke about already, the knell to mine ear, the imagery of death and the tone associated with that. Byron is unable to come to any conclusions, so tonally the poem is quite interesting because he's not sure how to greet Lady Webster when he sees her in public. He's not sure how to respond to her, and he comes to the conclusion that it is silence and tears, that it's going to be a very sorrowful reunion with her because he's unable to express his emotions about this relationship. So it is very much about Byron's sorrow, his feelings of misery, his feelings of insecurity, if you like, and his inability to come to terms with the fact that this relationship is over. So overall, it's a very dark tone that we're looking at here. It's a very miserable tone of the poem. Structurally, Byron's doing some very interesting things with When We Two Parted. The first of which we can look at is who the poem is, the voice of the poet is, and who the poem is being addressed to. So we do see the use of that first person pronoun I consistently throughout the poem, as this is Byron's personal thoughts, recollections, and his feelings about the relationship. For example, in stanza 2 we have, it felt like a warning of what I feel now. So we have this direct, this is my thoughts and my feelings. However, we also have this idea of the poem being addressed to a specific person. It's not a general address, it's not a musing on relationships as a whole, it's a specific address which is used as a second person voice. So, for example, they name thee before me in stanza 3, or we have long, long shall I rue thee. We also have the collective pronoun of we. Byron is constantly referring to them as a partnership. When we two parted, in secret we met. So the use of those pronouns structurally is quite interesting because he's talking about them as if they're a partnership still, and we can explore that, how that changes and shifts throughout the poem. This is a poem that we could argue is a cyclical poem. It starts and ends in the same place, and it does not have these clear conclusions that we might get with some of the other poems. It doesn't have a particular, like a volta or a change and shift in perspective. The poem starts with when we two parted, in silence and tears, and the final line is, the final pair of lines, is how should I greet thee, in silence and tears. So we have that cyclical structure. It's starting and ending in the same point, and there's no sort of concrete conclusions. It actually ends with a question and a half response, if you like. Byron's coming to a sort of half conclusion there. The fact that we have a consistent rhyme scheme throughout the poem, an A-B rhyme structure, could indicate that this is a poem that has taken time to reflect on, and that's reflected in the language of the poem as well. To sever for years indicates that this is a poem that Byron has been thinking about for a long, long time. And rhyme scheme tends to indicate potentially clarity of thought or time to structure and put things together rather than a stream of consciousness. So this could indicate that Byron's had plenty of time to recollect and think about the feelings and emotions before putting pen to paper. As we've already discussed language-wise, one of the main ideas that we have with this poem is the language of death and the language of separation. So we have things like a funeral knell being used here. We have pale, we have cold, we have chill. Now, all of these words we could link as a semantic field to do with sickness and illness to signify the relationship. There's also the language of questioning that we have here. So the fact that Byron is uncertain about things, we have words such as why, how, and those are the rhetorical questions that we have there are quite significant because it suggests to us that Byron is uncertain about the answers to this question, how this relationship should play out, or what he should be feeling at this time, and sort of evoking the miserable feelings that are going on around him. We have really interesting imagery, the idea of half broken hearted to sever for years. We have the idea of, in the final stanza, thy heart could forget, thy spirit deceive. This use of personification is quite significant, and we have that juxtaposed idea the spirit is meant to be something that is very almost godly, almost saintly, and it's a deceptive spirit that he has for her, that she has for him, sorry. We also have the fact that a heart could forget, the personification of your heart, forgetting these memories. That's really, really significant that we have throughout the poem. We have the vows being broken is a significant one as well. The idea of a vow being a promise, and we can imagine this being broken and smashed to pieces. As previously discussed in structure, the use of the pronouns is significant, who the poem is being addressed by and who it's been addressed to. So the fact that Byron is using the single person pronoun I to talk about his own feelings. He talks about thee and you when he's speaking about Lady Webster. And then we have the collective pronoun we when he's talking about the relationship as a whole, which is particularly significant. Byron also does some quite interesting things to do with sounds throughout the poem. So, for example, we have harsh alliterative sounds in the start of the poem in the first stanza, and we have pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss. So this harsh C sound is emphasising his anger, maybe his bitterness and his regret. We also have, at the end of stanza 2, the fact that we have I hear thy name spoken and share in its shame, where the softer sound of the S there could indicate the silence and could indicate the regret that he has there, the fact that he cannot speak out. Again, in the last stanza, in secret we met, in silence I grieve. We have that repeated soft S sound emphasising the silence that we have there. Byron also uses repetition quite consistently throughout the poem. So, for example, we've already spoken about the fact that there's lots of repeated adjectives like such as silence, and grief that we have going throughout the abstract noun grief. We also have things like the long shall I rue thee, where he's talking about how it's going to take a huge amount of time for him to recover from this relationship. So have a look at it. There are some quite interesting things that Byron does with sound, and if there are meaning behind that, if there is meaning behind that, then it's obviously an interesting one that we could start to explore. Okay, what we have now are two potential essay questions for When We Two Parted, one of which looking at When We Two Parted singularly, and the other one looking at a comparison across the rest of the collection. If you would like to wait on this one until we've done a couple more of the relationships poems, then feel free and have a look at the other videos that will be coming out for those. We will be doing some comparative work later on in the collection, having a look at how we'd go about comparing the different poems and ideas. Have a look at them, and then stay tuned at the end for our film recommendation for today. Okay, for the film recommendation today, I've gone for quite a strange little film, but it's absolutely excellent. And it's about overcoming adversity, it's about impressing your mentor, it's about trying to impress someone who's never ever going to be impressed by what you do and is always looking to put you down, and that's Whiplash. It's a fantastic film to look at a drummer in an orchestra and his desire to impress his mentor, and the ultimate respect that you could achieve from that. It's a fantastic film. There's some beautiful shots, and the finale, which I won't spoil, is one of the most excellent that I've seen in recent years, certainly. So check it out. Until next time, where we'll probably be looking at neutral tones. Make sure we stay safe, and I'll see you then.